Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Mold Dogs Podcast. I'm Tim Lyons. I'm here with Sean Gallivan. Today's episode, we are going to start with the Q&A segment. And so we have a question here from Jenny. Jenny would like to know, does Zuko sleep in a crate? So Jenny, Zuko does sleep in a crate. And for Zuko's been in a crate since he's a puppy. But for us now, as an adult, the biggest reason why we continue to keep Zuko in a crate because he's a working dog. And during the day, Zuko exerts an incredible amount of energy and he needs his rest. And so if he's not in his crate, because sometimes I happen to fall asleep before I put him in a crate, he is not very well rested the next day. And so it's important that, it's in his own space and that he gets to sleep throughout the night because he's got a big job to do the next day. So Zuko does sleep in a crate. Sean, what's your take on not only working dogs, but let's talk about pet dogs in general. Do you recommend your clients that they have their dogs in crates, or?
I'm an avid supporter of the crate. I do think that crates are good in ample amount of opportunities. Depending on your lifestyle, you may not need a crate as much, but it all comes down to separation anxiety. It all comes down to keeping a dog calm. If a dog, like a working line dog, is constantly just go, 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 and doesn't have a shut off time, it's going to be just like a human that is working 3 days straight, and you're just going to get angry. You're going to be always on edge. I mean, it's always going to be very irritable. So it's the same thing happens with a dog. They need to have their rest. When a dog goes into a cage, it's not a matter of a dog is in trouble. The dog goes into the cage to calm down and to relax. That's their safe getaway spot. So I do believe it. Even when you're older and you're retired, that's where I think that it's a little less needed. But at the same time, those people are going to the grocery store for groceries for even 30, 45 minutes. And then what's happening to their little Yorkie? The dog is freaking out at the house. So it all comes down to confidence. It's not because we want to keep a dog in a crate all day. That's not what I'm trying to advocate for. But a crate is still a good tool for a dog.
And if introduced right, they love their crates. That's
Absolutely.
their home, right?
Absolutely. Just like a kid with their room.
Yeah.
Even if you use your room as a punishment, a kid is still ready to go to their room and just escape reality whenever they need to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you for the question. Our next question comes from Mike. Mike says, you guys talked about similarities in your first episode, similarities in narcotics detection, explosive detection, and mold detection. Is search and rescue similar to mold detection? Sean, I'll go ahead and pass this question on to you.
So every detection of some sort of a dog is utilizing his nose is definitely similar. If a dog is working, a dog is working. It just comes down to what the dog is working for and how the dog is being utilized. In certain aspects, you're going to start diving down rabbit holes on keeping a dog very calm. And certain things, you're going to go down rabbit holes of just making sure a dog is an open search area. So where a dog can be in a huge field. So when it comes to search and rescue, really the only difference that I would say is that search and rescue, you're kind of going off residual odor, off tracked odor, almost like mobile odor. Whereas in molds, you're never really going to have mold odor. You know what I'm saying?
Say that 5 times. So basically, kind of what you're saying is, scent is scent, but depending on what their job is, what they're trying to actually achieve, is on where you take that training to.
For sure.
For instance, you mentioned like search and rescue dogs, or a lot of times they're trying to find a missing person, and where they're going to do that is outside. And so, so they're searching large fields where there's no people. So these search and rescue dogs are probably not training inside a home or inside a house trying to find, or inside a mall, a mall where there's lots of people, right? That wouldn't be.
I would say that's more of like even a tracking dog who would be inside of that mall. But a search and rescue is usually going into a field, is usually going into the Everglades, is going into something where, there's just acres and acres, or maybe even miles of openness where the dog has to be able to go and search, like in mountains and something like that.
And going along with what their job there's like slight differences or maybe bigger than slight, but in like article tracking rather than odor tracking. Like the dogs are presented an article and they're trying to find the scent to that article from that article, right?
For sure.
That's the tracking.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for reaching out to us with these questions. Feel free to reach out to us on any platform, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, social media. email us at info@pausonmold if you have any questions. We'd love to reply to those questions. So today we are going to dive into how mold has impacted our families and how that has led us to starting a mold detection company. So I'll go ahead and start. For me, my story started back in 2004 when my son was born. And so for the first year of his life, my son struggled with breathing, all sorts of different breathing issues. And so bought my first home. I was in my late 20s and bought a home in Sugarloaf Key. And it was an older home, and I had no idea what mold was. So let's start premising with that. I knew what mold is, but didn't know the effects that it would have on us. And apparently none of the doctors did either. So first step was pediatrician. Symptoms were wheezing, had extreme problems breathing and sleeping. And so the doctor said that first it was a cold, and then it led to allergies. Then we saw a specialist in Miami. And by that time, Jack was on Pulmicort, steroids, and breathing machines every night. And just really with no answers. We went to Miami, and it was like the first person who gave us an answer was that it was baby asthma. And they said potentially that that they can grow at it. But didn't know why it was caused or why I had it or anything. And so, none of our family members had asthma. And so we started giving them this medicine, which masked the problem a little bit, but didn't solve the issues completely. And it wasn't until kind of bittersweet. Hurricane Wilma came knocking down our door, literally, in 2004. And Jack was a year old. We just celebrated his year birthday. We evacuated him out of the home, but it was my first home, and I was stupid and decided not to leave. And so we stayed in that home, me and my German Shepherd, Hans, at the time, and overnight until water came in the house. And side note, great story about German Shepherds, is I was home alone with my Shepherd. And so as soon as Hans saw water coming in the front door, he immediately went into the nursery to check to see if Jack was there. Jack wasn't there. Then he immediately went to the master bedroom to see if he was there. Jack, his mom had evacuated, so no one was in the master bedroom. And then he went into the third bedroom where we had our cousin staying with us to see if he was there. By the time Hans came out of the third bedroom, he was swimming. And so we ended up going across the street. And long story short, we ended up getting a FEMA trailer, and a brand new FEMA trailer. And within 3 to 4 weeks, all Jack's symptoms were gone. And we ended up taking him off the medicine, off the singular, taking him off all the breathing machines. And he has had no problems with any breathing since then. Played sports growing up his whole life and had no issues with that. And I thought, knowing, it wasn't when it all cleared up, I thought, I have some great news for these doctors. I've seen all these specialists and all these people. And so I'm like, wow, I'm going to tell them that, wow, I think we solved the problem. I think it was mold. I think we were living in a toxic mold home. And so I called the specialists up, and I just got the feeling that they were happy that Jack was healed, but didn't really tell me that it was mold. Didn't believe it was mold, and I'm not surprised because here we are. Jack is 21 now and healthy, and we're still, I think, having a hard time for traditional medicines to kind of recognize the impacts that mold has on your life. So, sure. So it's kind of, that's, the main reason that stuck with me, all these years. And so that's a little bit about me. So Sean, why don't you tell us about your war story with mold?
Mine's very, very similar. I played sports my whole entire life. I was varsity soccer my freshman year. I played all 4 years varsity soccer. So, I was a runner. And I joined the Marine Corps. I was 18 years old, 9 days after graduation. So I didn't let any time lapse of me not running. I went right into boot camp and ran my butt off. And then right after boot camp, I went to combat training. We went to pre-deployment training where we were in 29 Palms. So I was outside for for a long amount of time, and then we finally came back, and we were in in our barracks, and our barracks had mold everywhere. But at the time, it was just those are old barracks. Just you got to deal with it. So I mean, my mom's got plethora of pictures of me in the barracks with just mold everywhere. My mom used to say, like, don't you fail inspection? And we're like, Ma, you can't wipe that off the wall. So that's what happens when you're living in 100-year-old buildings. But nonetheless, we had to do a physical before we deployed. And it's funny you just said asthma, because that's exactly what they said I had, was asthma. And they're telling me to blow in tubes, and they're trying to say, how was my air capacity? And it turned out that that's what they told me I had seasonal asthma. And and so when I went on pre-deployment training and I was out of my barracks for a solid month, then I had to do a physical again. And when I did my physical there, they're like, yo, you're good to go. And it was weird how I was good to go in the desert's physical training, but I wasn't good to go back in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina's physical training. It was because every single day I was living in that barracks as opposed to living into a tent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's amazing. And the amount of stories, like, it seems like almost every call that we get for inspections, that the mold's affected at least one person in their family tremendously.
For sure. Yeah.
And so glad that I'm glad that we met. It's funny too, because the other end of it is our love for dogs, right? And
sure.
I've always had German Shepherds growing up, and so when we met, I knew I wanted another German Shepherd. It was time, because it had been over 10 years since I had put Hans down. Hans lived 14, and so it was time for another Shepherd. And so when I saw Sean's dogs had litters, and so I met these dogs, and the mom and dad were both working dogs. Rocco was an explosive dog, right? Vixie was a narcotics dog. And so I'm like, came with Sean. I'm like, Sean, I really want to work this dog. Let's do. And really, I thought, it's funny with our first question with search and rescue, because I really thought I wanted to do search and rescue. I thought I wanted to give back and gone through the natural disaster that I went through, and like swimming out of my home. I kind of felt like I wanted to kind of be a part of that. And so, a different direction, but I still think we're helping out people. And there was Sean who brought up, what about mold detection? Detections work is something that, he explained that he's been doing for a long time now. And so I'm glad that we went into that direction, and we're having some good success.
For sure. For sure. Learn a lot down the road, but
absolutely. We're learning that every day. I had the passion, or we both had the passion for the dogs and the personal experiences of the mold that we've gone through. But now I can honestly say that I actually have an equal passion for mold and the secrecies of it. And I was talking with a microbiologist the other day, and he actually called me a nerd. And I don't think I've ever been called a nerd before. And I kind of liked it, because he just said, man, you're really into this whole thing. So it's been fun. It's been a journey. So,
well, hey guys, that sums it up for Paws on Mold. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And we can't wait to answer your questions next time on our next episode. Have a good one, guys.